Hey y'all, I'm Reese, and welcome to Making Meaning. Making Meaning is here to guide you along your path to make meaning in a way that makes sense for you. This week, I am joined by my colleague Stephanie Waite. Stephanie is the Associate Director of TCU's Neely Alcon Career Center and works closely with Idea Factory, TCU's Human-Centered Design Institute, and how both of us met. Beyond the amazing work she is doing at TCU, Stephanie has worked in higher education for 15 years and is truly a wealth of knowledge when it comes to guiding young adults through the turbulent and formative years of college and the decisions that these years force young people to make. Stephanie believes in empowering students to make decisions that are logical, financially beneficial, and that encourage their own fulfillment and purpose and growth through their college careers. With her own background centering in philosophy and English literature, Stephanie truly brings a spectrum of expertise to this conversation, and I really adored getting to sit down and chat a bit more with her about life and meaning and how we use these concepts of philosophy to inform big life decisions like the ones she helps students make. So, let's take a deep breath and get started. Okay, awesome. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi, Reese. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, very good.
Firstly, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
I know that you are very busy, and I appreciate you giving me your valuable, amazing time.
Of course, this is what I'm here for.
So, to get us started, I just want to ask, what's one thing you're grateful for right now?
I'm grateful for time.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with time. Yep.
Can I ask more?
Yeah. So, time's a big life element for me. So I think about this a lot, that you can buy more things, you can buy resources, you can buy an education, right? Like, you can buy a lot of things. Time, you can't buy more of.
No.
And folks will say things like, oh, if you eat right and exercise, and you can
You're getting yourself more time.
Yeah. But the truth is that we only get so much time on this planet. And so, when I think about, any kind of gratitude exercises, or when I reflect at the end of the day, like, how did I spend my time? Mm-hmm. Was that a good use of my time? And,
right.
Trying as much to kind of live in those moments of those times that we get.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, to kind of switch gears but kick it into a little bit more about how you do these things and practice these things, tell me your story. Whatever that means for you, in as much detail or as little detail as you want.
Yeah, since we're kind of sitting in a higher education space here, I think I'll start my story with saying that I started sitting in college classrooms when I was 7 years old. So
I did not know this.
Yeah. My dad was a non-traditional aged college student.
Okay.
He, at the age of 27, he became an amputee on the job. So he was a machinist. And there was an accident one day on the job, and then they had to amputate his right arm. And he decided at that point, oh, wow, what am I going to do? I can no longer be a machinist. What does life look like for me? I got 2 young girls, got a wife, all that kind of stuff. And so he went back to school, and there wasn't really a lot of resources for me or my sister to have childcare elsewhere. So so he just brought us to school with him. And so luckily, the community college that he went to, and then the university later, very close to our home, and we just... my sister and I would sit in the back of the classrooms quite frequently. And we would color or draw, but the
info's there floating into your little 7-year-old brain.
Yeah, it was quite amazing to just see the dynamic, of my dad being a student in that class and pulling, a couple of desks together because they didn't have left-handed desks at that point. And so he's pulling the desks together and getting ready to, listen to the professor and engage with the students and interact with, people who were 10 years younger than him. And it was just kind of a cool upbringing, I mean, I didn't think of it at the time, and in retrospect, like this is how I'm thinking about it and kind of my own through line. So I've worked in higher education for 15 years, and I kind of find the space in education to be one of home. It feels very, very familiar.
Yeah.
And I think, like what was really the genesis of a lot of that. And it at some level, it must have been this very early exposure to being in a college classroom.
Right, sure. Yeah. Super interesting. So do you think that seeing your dad, who's had this tremendous life change when you were little, how do you think that impacted you and the way you view life?
Yeah. I think that what I've come to kind of start to say, probably in the last couple of years, is there's a million different ways to live.
Yeah.
And I think that the more and more I work with college-age students, the more I work alongside, boomers and Gen Xers and millennials, and I see this desire to kind of put oneself on a conveyor belt. Right? Like, okay, I'm going to just go and do this job, and it's going to have this kind of retirement when I'm done, and I'll own my house at this age, and, kind of check in the box.
I'll do the things.
I'll do all of the things.
Yeah.
And completely valid.
Right.
That's how, right? Like there is like, okay, how do I want to, navigate through this world? How do I want to think about or spend my time or whatever, Great. Yes. Go do it. But I think my experience as a 7-year-old and going through, elementary, middle, high school, all of that, watching my dad be a career changer 5 different times, go to school, go back to school, like he went back to school so many times. He's got an MPA, an MBA, like he's got a nice collection. So, he's also a trained engineer, so he has a nice collection of, educational degrees, and but all the while he's, raising a family and taking care of his parents and taking care of my mom's parents, and also doing all of these other. So life can be incredibly dynamic, and it can change so frequently. And the thing that I tell college students all the time is, if you come into this institution and leave this institution and you are the same exact person, like something went terribly wrong. Yeah. Right? Yep. And so I think about that too when I think about how many times folks can make different educational choices or career choices. If they're just making the same exact types of choices again and again and again, then where was that dynamic element of life? And that's where I lean back on this. There's a million different ways to live. Right. And that's not just to say that there's a million different ways that a lot of different people can live. There's a million different ways that
each one of us can.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. So.
Wow. I think that is really, really powerful. And obviously seeing your dad try out these several different ways of living and go back and change things, of course had an impact. So how do you, Stephanie, incorporate this dynamic style of living into your life? How is that manifested for you?
Yeah. Well, for one, I've always had more than one job.
You're like, I'm very busy.
Several irons in the fire, that's for sure. I try to simplify certain aspects of my life while also creating unique complexity elsewhere. So, and I'm not afraid of that, I guess, is what it kind of comes down to, witnessing that, all throughout my upbringing, and well into adulthood, that, there are 24 usable hours in every day, right?
Yeah.
And so you can, as long as you're kind of willing to, and I'm, I'll speak directly from my own perspective here, that I am willing to engage in that deeper conversation, take that extra bit of time with somebody, learn about someone's unique perspective, and then say, ooh, do I agree, disagree? Can I incorporate that into how I'm thinking about things now? And, like I said, I always kind of joke that, I've always had more than one job, but, it's kind of neat to engage with different communities and different types of people across different university spaces. So, I work full-time for TCU, but I also teach a class for Florida State University. Right. And I've been doing that for, 12 years?
Yeah.
It's been a little over 12 years.
Yeah.
And so having that variety in my kind of thought processes and mental space, and how I'm kind of solving problems, or acquiring new problems, right?
Yeah.
I think that's something that's kind of cool, that you can kind of choose which problems you want to go after and solve.
Absolutely. So one of the big things for me when I think about acquiring new problems and asking these kind of big life questions, and even going back to your point at the beginning about time, the questions and problems we choose to tackle really is an important choice because our time is limited. How do you choose which problems and questions to chase?
My North Star is social justice.
Okay.
So when I was at Flagler College, St. Augustine, Florida, I chose to study English literature and philosophy. And in my philosophy courses, of course, each major required a lot of reading.
Yes.
And in one of my philosophy courses, the required text was Plato's Republic.
Yep.
And Plato's Republic tackles this larger question of what is justice.
Yeah. And
I remember it was so key to me at the time that I'm kind of reading this, and it's all in utilizing kind of the Socratic method, right, of dialogue, and asking folks, what are the elements that make for a more just society. And one of the pieces there was grappling with the individual and the collective or community. So on an individual level, tackling questions of mind, body, and spirit. Yeah. Right? What makes for a full person, if you will. And then, thinking about at the collective level, how folks are engaged in community and spending their time.
And with other people.
Right. Workers, soldiers, philosopher kings. Right? These were the main elements or main roles within society. And so when I think about my time and space in higher education, for the last 15 years, I've been doing a lot of student-facing work, helping young people as they are navigating through college curriculum, college spaces, career and major decision-making. And I think, okay, so how we spend our time, how we engage in the world really matters. Yeah. And if there is this misalignment between the individual, your values, your interests, your skills, and what you're doing in this communal space, if there's misalignment, then I'm not sure that we're reaching a real just society. So when I say my North Star is societal justice, I'm thinking about those things at the multitude
How
of
do
those
we align
levels.
the individual with the community in a prosperous way?
Right.
That is so powerful. And I mean, so I come from a background of philosophy and literature too. So I'm like, Plato's Republic is like one of those foundational philosophic texts that everyone in philosophy, I feel like has to read at some point, right? And one of the questions from that I still to this day ruminate on, which, I mean, these are questions that we can't find perfect answers to, but going back to the individual in this dynamic of the individual with the society, this question of the mind, body, and spirit. Mm-hmm. Do you agree that those are the three elements of the human being? What do those elements mean for you?
Yeah.
What do those look like? Because I think those are very difficult to kind of pin down and define, but it's important to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's always a good starting point.
Yeah.
Right. So thinking about how, in modern times, right? We're talking about a very old text here.
Yes.
But in modern times, you'll hear a lot of debates about these kinds of things. What makes, what's something that constitutes personhood, right?
Consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of think, well, it's probably not a perfect representation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not sufficient.
Right.
But I will call these the necessary conditions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Mind, body, and spirit, the necessary conditions. And there are things that, we neglect or that are imbalanced or that, we kind of push aside. I'll never forget the look on some students' faces when I've said the term, values. Right. And the association of values is it's oftentimes in a kind of spiritual way.
Right. Religious values.
Right. And so, and this is just kind of where it's evolved into or morphed into, but it's not always the case that they're, mutually exclusive from a more like secular viewpoint.
Right.
So how do you allow yourself to engage in that kind of introspective way so that you can identify, okay, how am I engaging my mind, my body, and the spiritual components of self in order to get to know thyself better?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then engage with
the community.
Within the community.
Better.
With purpose, with meaning, with good intention, right? So yeah, I think it's a great starting point.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. What are ways that you have asked those questions of yourself to get to know Stephanie better?
That's a good question. I think finding that time and space to reflect on the day. So this used to happen over dinner, right? Like you sat around the dinner table with your family.
What'd you do today?
And you process, and it looks a little bit different, It's me and my husband and our two little dogs, but it's finding that time and space to reflect on okay, how did I spend my time and what did that really look like, and where did I mess up in the day? Where did I really it was a swing and a miss.
Yep.
But where did I really knock it out of the park? I don't know why I'm using sports analogies here, but I am.
There you go.
So, what felt really good and in alignment for me in that day or that week, or sometimes it's that month or that year,
Yeah.
But there have been some of these kind of pivotal moments and punctuated events, if you will, in my own life that have caused me to go, okay, wait a second. Who am I? What am I really about? And are my actions really showcasing a level of, really shocasing the values that I want to live by? And, back in 2020 and the year of the great pandemic.
The year of COVID.
Yes. I distinctly remember having this moment of, okay, if I had to name with, one hand, 5 fingers, what are my life's wants right now in this moment, at this age, in this space and time? Because, it was very bleak at that time. And we were thinking, okay, well, if I get this virus, I could die, right? There are people my age that were getting it and dying, right?
Yep.
there was a lot still unknown. And so I had to think in that moment, like, if I were just living this exact life and I were to die tomorrow, like, what would I be really happy and proud with what I was doing and how I was living? And if not, what are those less than 5 things that I need in order to feel really good about the choices I make?
I need some more time for these things.
Yes. So we made a list and stopped, delaying some levels of gratification of things like, oh, okay, do we want to keep living in the New England area? Or are we ready to live someplace else? And so I think it's really taking that time to be honest with yourself, your partner or your partners or family or whoever it is, but being really honest about your own level of are you living the life that you want, or are you living the life that somebody else wants for you? And so I think taking that time and having a really trusted thought partner, and I'm incredibly lucky I have that thought partner in my husband who doesn't come with he's the biggest stakeholder, but also at the same time ready to do whatever it is that's epic. That needs to happen next.
Having someone like that is that's
Yeah.
amazing and lovely.
And I think part of that too is he also embraces and believes there's a million different ways to live.
Yeah.
And
in that is a shared value, right? I think that aligning on that level with a life partner is so important. So that's really amazing. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
I do, yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not overrunning.
That's good.
Talking about where you draw your values from. You mentioned that a lot of students tend to think about that from like a spiritual or religious point of view. Mm-hmm. Has that been an experience for you that you find values in that, or is a higher power a part of that at all? Or no? What does that kind of look like, or your place in the broader world? Is there a higher power there? What's your picture of that?
I guess to be really clear and direct, like no, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But I don't. It comes from a more secular space for me. Something that I used to say all the time, and I still think I still believe this to be the case for myself, but it's something that I really hope is true. I hope that there's order and meaning and purpose and this much larger, omni power, right?
Yeah.
Like I hope
omni.
That's
yeah.
I really
Yeah.
like that would be really nice and comforting.
Yeah.
Right? It all makes sense. It's all interwoven. Everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like you hear these things.
No such thing as coincidence.
Right,
yeah.
right. And like I really, like a big part of me is like, that would be really cool.
That would be really nice.
But I'm also completely 100% okay with sitting in the chaos too.
That is amazing. And I think that's a place that it's really hard to be in. And I think that is a great practice, even for people who think they have that box checked. Sitting back and thinking, what if it wasn't?
Right.
Sit in the chaos. How would that change the way you're spending your time right now?
Yeah.
I think that's a big question. So is it more of a question mark for you and you're kind of like, I'm open to exploring different things? Or is it something that you're just like, I just don't know if I'm ever going to know. I'm just going to...
Yeah, I think I very much embrace just Socratic doubt, right? Like, okay, I could just be wrong about this.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. I think that a big piece of identifying values outside of a religious tradition,
right,
is an exercise in and of itself, right? Like,
yes.
But B, I think it's something that I pinpoint and identify in a lot of other kind of ways, and I don't necessarily have a need or a drive in the direction of building any specific religious bridge for that.
I think that makes perfect sense, especially if you've done this introspection work of what are my values, what makes sense for me, what makes sense with how I connect with my broader community, isn't that the question that religion is supposed to fill anyways?
Right. It's all asking the same questions, just not necessarily coming to the same conclusion. Right?
Exactly. Or using the same words, but asking that same question. That is, I'm like, that's just cool.
Yeah. It's funny because I sometimes I'll talk about, okay, what do I think is the start of my life? Like, what's the start of my story? So, like, back to one of your very first questions, like, what's the start of your story? And depending on the space that I'm in, I'll start with, I was 7 years old, like sitting in a college classroom, right? Because I'm thinking about my life in a higher education space, or my life as the work that I do.
Yeah.
But if I had to kind of pinpoint more of a values driven or any level of like spiritual start of my story, it probably happened in college. Like if I were to start the story of how did I start to identify or embrace different value systems, or understanding what value systems even were.
And how does that apply to me? And
it was college. It was flat out first semester, fall of 2002. 2002. And sitting in, Dr. Klein's philosophy class.
Boom.
Like that's, those were the moments that, for me, sitting through high school years, sitting through, like listening and learning a lot, but not having a broader context or understanding, or sometimes I just like sat on questions. So I had this friend in high school. His name was Jolt, and he was from Germany.
What an epic name!
He was cool. And he had recently came to the States and landed in Miami, Florida. And he was reading a book one day in our geometry class. He was kind of bored in geometry because he was like, I took geometry like 3 years ago.
Right.
Anyway, he was sitting reading a book, and I said, "Oh, what are you reading?" And he was like, "Oh, it's a philosophy book." And he showed me this passage where they were talking about rocks, and that to the human eye, a rock is an inanimate object. It's just there and exists, and we can trace back, how did this rock come to be? But it's just a rock.
Yeah.
Right? And this passage was questioning whether or not, just because we can't equate, what we have identified as a living human being, right? Breathing and walking and, having these kind of elements or qualities that make us a person. That doesn't mean that there aren't other qualities that exist for a rock.
Yeah.
And I remember bringing that passage up in my first philosophy class, and the professor saying, this is exactly the type of question that we are going to answer in this class. And of course, we never answered this question in this class, right? But it was about asking more questions and those types of questions, and really mentally displacing yourself from what you had been raised to learn and educated through in a K through 12 system.
Yeah, mental displacement is so important for furthering the self, the broader society, finding and identifying what is just. Like, you have to step outside of your own framework. Yeah. That is so powerful. And I think to kind of tie these two things, because I think it's interesting that you've presented almost like these two kind of sides of yourself, where it's like you have viewing Stephanie as what you do, right? And then viewing Stephanie as like, who am I, almost. And it's like they are very interrelated still. Yeah. And I think that the work that we've done together with life design, I think, touches on a lot of these questions too. Yeah. So it's really cool for me, knowing a little bit of your background and now hearing this, to see how those are interwoven and how asking these big questions can be talked about in a life design setting, in a human-centered design setting, but it can also be in this other realm. Like, they are different frameworks for talking about these same questions. Yeah. So I just, what a eye-opening kind of moment for me that I think is really wonderful. Yeah. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
And since you have an English lit background, I have to stipulate you're not allowed to hyphenate. It has to be one word.
Okay.
There are no loopholes. but if you have to use one word to describe how you feel right now, what would that one word be?
Gosh, you were really saving the toughest question for the
end. and it does not have to be fancy or perfect. Whatever word comes to mind and you're like, ooh, that one.
I'd like to say that there are a lot of words kind of floating through my mind right now, but wow. The thing that's kind of coming to mind is actually hopeful. And I know that sounds so cheesy.
No, but I love that.
But I think we could talk about the doom and gloom, right? I even talked about the pandemic on this episode, right? Like, oh my goodness. We could talk about the challenges, the hardship, the difficulty navigating, new situations and experiences, or, in retrospect, when did your life story begin? All this, right? And like, you can easily slip into a space where it feels very daunting and big and heavy. And I tend to talk about a lot of things in a very heavy kind of way. And
me too.
I know it, right? Like, you're like that person that comes to the party and they're like, this person's going to ask me like 20 questions, And, coming at, with that like genuine curiosity just about the world and people and how everything engages with one another and interacts with one another. But I have a lot of and maybe it's that I have a lot of hope, or I want a lot of hope, or that I want others to feel a lot of hope around the to have the confidence to navigate these kinds of spaces with courage and confidence. Yeah. And so, I work with thousands and thousands of young people trying to just navigate this space of higher education and, major and career decision making, and, the question of what do I want to do with the rest of my life, and all of those kinds of things. And I really, I find that things like life design, things like philosophy, I think that, there's an entire discipline that's dedicated. Philosophy is completely dedicated to asking these kinds of questions, these larger questions. And I'm hopeful that folks will start to gravitate more toward these things so that we can together build a more just society.
Me too.
I'm going to go with hope.
I love that.
That was a very long, you want one word and I gave you a whole dissertation.
Hope is the perfect word. Hope is literally the perfect word.
That's what comes to mind for me in this moment.
I love that. I think that is beautiful in its full circleness, and it's honoring the using your words doom and gloom, but also the not so heavy, not so heady joy of the day-to-day as well, that we can have and hold both. I think that's wonderful and a really, really fabulous place to end our conversation today. So thank you so, so much for being so vulnerable and taking the time to share this. This has just been a joy to chat.
Thank you, Reese. This was really fun.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you all so much for listening today. Even though this was a shorter episode, I think we really got to the heart of a lot of super, super important questions. If you want more info about today's episode, head to thecoherecollective.com and click on blog. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you can subscribe to our newsletter on thecoherecollective.com so you never miss another episode. For updates on all of our stuff, follow us on Instagram at The Cohere Collective, and if you so wish, you can follow me on Instagram at Lillian Reese Brown. If you feel so inclined, feel free to leave an honest review or rating. Those reviews and ratings help me reach an audience that resonates with what I'm doing, wants to hear more of what I'm doing, which will help me hopefully reach my goal of making the world a better place. Sharing the pod is also a great way to start conversations with important people in your life, so if there's anyone you think could gain something from this convo, definitely give it a share. Right now, I'm feeling warm. I am about to go on vacation with my mom, which I am really looking forward to, and listening back to this conversation just really made me feel so lucky to have a colleague like Stephanie, and again, just to be able to have these conversations. So I'm doing good. I hope that you all are doing well as well. Thank you for being here, and I hope you feel like you're living more coherently. Catch y'all next time. Love.